Okay, we'll get started. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So welcome to today's webinar, Identity Theft, the Biggest Cyber Battleground. My name's Simon, one of the team presenting this important conversation alongside our speakers from SpyCloud. Over the next 45 minutes, we're going to unpack why identity remains the #1 target in the cyber landscape. With nearly 80% of all breaches involving stolen credentials, it's safe to say identity theft has moved beyond personal inconvenience and is now a critical enterprise risk. A huge 91% of organizations reported identity-related security incidents in the last year alone. And while many of us continue to focus on endpoints or infrastructure, attackers are quietly exploiting stolen usernames, passwords, device fingerprints, and even session cookies, all available right now on the dark web. So today's session will explore what data about your employees is already in criminal hands, how many online identities one person really has, and how platforms like SpyCloud recapture darknet data that traditional tools completely miss. We're also going to demo how this works in real time and provide actionable ways that you can protect your organization. And finally, a quick reminder, this is an interactive session, so feel free to post questions in the chat and we'll get to them in the Q&A at the end. So let's jump in. We'll do a quick introduction to the panel and a quick summary of who Secure Agility is. So as mentioned, my name is Simon. I'm the cybersecurity practice lead here at Secure Agility. I'm joined today by Andrew, Regional Director of SpyCloud, and also Philip, Senior Solutions Engineer and Investigator at SpyCloud. At Secure Agility, we've been working with enterprises and governments for over 20 years. We operate to the highest standards, ISO 27001, and are certified at Essential 8, Maturity Level 3. And then what that really means is it ensures that everything we do is built on security by design. Our cybersecurity practice spans everything from architecture and compliance through to detection, response, and advisory services. This includes SOC and SIEM environments, strengthening IAM and zero trust models, delivering vulnerable management, pen testing, and providing that traditional endpoint and data protection. Now, our goal with all this is very simple, is to give organizations confidence that their identity, data, and systems are protected in this ever-evolving threat landscape. This makes our partnership with SpyCloud very important. They are a global leader in that identity protection and threat remediation space. SpyCloud specializes in detecting those stolen credentials, personal information, and financial data that's circulating in criminal marketplaces, and ideally before it gets used against you. Now, together, we're going to bring an identity-first approach to cybersecurity, ensuring that you just don't detect these threats, but actively disrupt them. In today's session, the SpyCloud team will show you a demo of how they uncover an organization's exposure. And beyond this webinar, SpyCloud can run a demo with your data so you can see a real impact, and also a no obligation POC so you can see the impact firsthand. And with that, I will hand over to you, Andrew, to start walking us through the SpyCloud platform.
Great, thank you, Simon. Appreciate it. And thank you all for your time today as well. A little bit of background about SpyCloud before I jump into the specifics of what it is that we do. We've been around for a little over 9 years at this point. We just had our 9-year anniversary last month, I believe. We were led by Microsoft in our Series B funding, and we currently service over half of the Fortune 10 and dozens of the world's the largest organizations, recognizable logos, as well as defense organizations around the world, departments of defense, and both military and federal government agencies of the US and beyond. Essentially, what we do here and what we offer, SpyCloud is at its core a data company. We are the industry leader when it comes to providing recaptured exposed credentials, and we do so by having the largest repository of exposed credentials in existence. I'm going to share just one slide here and talk over it for a moment to illustrate some of these points. I'm going to try to keep this pretty brief because we have a lot to get through demo-wise, which is when I'll hand it over to Phil in just a moment. But just to provide you all a little bit of context about what separates us from other companies, that purport to offer exposed credentials or dark web monitoring services, etc. Almost always, those companies are either plugging into third-party data feeds, or if they are going through their own proprietary processes, they're using methodology that's been around for 15 to 20 years at this point, a little outdated. And you may hear this method called scanning or scraping or the deployment of dark web crawlers. But essentially, it's automated code that goes out and scrapes the most publicly accessible areas on the dark web, the easy to reach, easier to penetrate, lower hanging fruit, and that being such records that are found in public paste bins and other, again, more easily accessed areas. That's all well and good. You can get information that way. That's better than nothing, certainly. But almost always the focus there is going to be only on third-party breach data, and you're going to run into a lot of outdated data, a lot of duplicate data, a lot of records that have been around and repackaged and resold on combo lists and things of that nature. And often they have lost relevance when it comes to what's actionable and what really needs remediation. So rather than waiting for a year or two after an event for those exposed records to bubble up into those easier to reach areas, SpyCloud likes to get to that information as quickly as possible. Sometimes that's the same day as an event. Sometimes it's day one or day two or week one or week two, but still months and sometimes years ahead of your more commonly given information from platforms that purport to do dark web monitoring. The way we go about that's different is rather than relying on those automated pieces of code to do the scanning and scraping for us, we rely on human intelligence. So we have real teams of real people embedded in the criminal communities, leveraging relationships that they've developed over many years through the use of sock puppets and alias accounts and other tradecraft. And we get into what's represented here as the lower and core levels of the dark web. And sometimes we're accessing records before they even hit the dark web in a meaningful way by invading channels that are often closed networks, Telegram channels, private Discord servers, other IRC channels, invite-only forums and marketplaces on the dark web, and so forth. And we're getting our hands on data that other platforms either will never have, or again, they may not have for months or years down the road. Normally, I would pause for questions there, but I think we're going to do a Q&A at the end. Feel free to interrupt, certainly, if there's anything pressing or note any questions on that methodology for later. One more point I'd like to hit is our ability to curate the data. And what I mean is, oftentimes when the criminals have any measure of success in penetrating an environment of an organization, they're often exfiltrating large catalogs of data. These can be millions of records big. Sometimes they're combined with other things. It could be older combo lists. It could be newer malware events. It could be all kinds of different things that are bundled together in these closed networks, and they need assistance getting from point A to point B with that information before they're able to monetize it or weaponize it. It's not very human readable in this format, oftentimes not even really machine readable. And so what SpyCloud is able to do, which often takes the criminals many months, in about 15 minutes, when we pull data into our analytics engine here at SpyCloud, it does all the deduplication, the parsing, the normalizing, the formatting, the decrypting, password cracking, everything we need to do to provide our clients information that is human readable or is machine accessible via our API options. And we'll discuss some of those integrations here in just a bit. But again, that gives you another jump on remediation when it comes to the criminal's ability to use that information. So that's really both sides of the coin, the method in which we get the data and therefore the volume of data that we get, as well as the speed with which we're able to curate that data and present it to our clients. Also, in addition to third-party breach information, SpyCloud's able to get a lot of unique data types and data sets. We'll look at examples of malware logs in just a moment. Those are very rich in metadata and machine information. We also get session cookies, device tokens, a lot of credit card numbers, government IDs, other various PII that we're able to correlate behind the scenes to provide a more holistic view of an individual's identity. And Phil will color in the lines there for me in just a moment. But that is, in a nutshell, what we do and how we do it a bit differently. As we go through the demo in a moment, we're going to hit what we refer to as our three-legged stool of products here at SpyCloud. We're going to start with the most common, and that is our enterprise protection. That's going to be when an organization would like to look inwardly at their own exposures, their employee records, etc. We do have consumer risk protection as well. That would be if you have clientele that logs into an external facing portal, think of a bank or a hotel or airline that offers reward systems, etc. Anywhere where a stolen consumer's account could maybe result in fraud or access to sensitive consumer data. And then we have our investigations tools, or tool rather, that's a bit more manual, but it allows you access to our entire data lake. You are deciding where to start within that data and what you're looking for, rather than the alerts being automatically bubbled up for you like they are on the enterprise and consumer protection. So Phil's going to hit all three of these. I think we're going to start with enterprise protection, and then move to investigations, and then close out with our consumer protection. Phil,
Fantastic.
anything to add before I hand over? Sorry. Or Simon?
I'm going to answer a question that's in the webinar chat. It says, is malware detection via a platform like SpyCloud necessary if we already have EDR protection deployed? I don't know if Andrew talked on this, but about 60% of our malware data actually has where the malware detected some kind of endpoint security on the host. And oftentimes it's not uncommon for us to see, Defender or CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or whatever platform missed the point of infection. And if you go to a SANS class on some of the SANS classes, they will actually teach you how to bypass endpoint protection. It's not that difficult. And that's the reason the EDR is so necessary to see that lateral movement. And so with that said, we can help with the enterprise, but oftentimes you'll see that you're seeing things on your employees unmanaged as far as home devices accessing corporate resources. And that's where SpyCloud is very invaluable in the fact that we don't need an endpoint. We're just getting information from the criminal channel. But fantastic question.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
And I'll add to that. So with SpyCloud, there is no agent to deploy. It's all cloud-based and cloud hosted. So we basically issue you login credentials and you're in, and then Phil will tell you how you manage your what we call your watch list items, what it is you're looking at exactly. But with the EDR protection, I'll just repeat because I think it's a very noteworthy statistic. Again, over 60% of the malware records that come into SpyCloud show that the machine does have EDR protection, and that doesn't even account necessarily for the home devices, which can be a little bit of the Wild West, right? If you have kids at home, teenagers at home that are gaming on Steam or doing who knows what else that could be potentially infecting the machine. And so the EDR protection is certainly important, but if you're taking a full-on belt and suspenders approach, definitely a good idea to have visibility on those machines for malware, so you don't have just a false sense of security of EDR only. I think we had another question, Bill, before we get started. How does SpyCloud handle data sovereignty? So I get different forms of this question pretty frequently. Essentially, the data is hosted here on AWS here in the US, I mean, and it's accessed via the cloud, right? So there's no on-premise solution for our data when it comes to the sovereignty issue, et cetera. Essentially, what we're doing is we're holding up a mirror to the criminal underground to information that's already out there, right? So it's not organization A is data, organization B's data. It's data about organization A or B that's already out there in the ethos in these criminal communities that we're just letting you know, whether you look at it or not, this is in the hands of individuals who may be looking to use it in a nefarious purpose.
100%. So this is the portal. I'm actually going to start in a different place to show you that not only can we give you as far as a standard, hey, these are your email addresses and what's been lost, but we can actually see things at a machine level. And so I'm using a workflow here called compromised devices, and I can bring this up showing a data link analysis from the infected machine. And from here, just at a high level, I get to see that, hey, what all is at play with this machine right here? I get to see single sign-on, right? I get to see Okta. I get to see there's a GitHub repository tied to both the email address for my corporate user as well as a username. And additionally, other things lost by this machine is OpenAI, so ChatGPT. At this point, if I want to see any of the information, I can see it over this left-hand panel. So you get to see this is a Windows 10 home. So as mentioned, by Andrew, it actually has the Windows Defender likely by default. You get to see oftentimes whatever the malware brings in. So oftentimes the malware will let us know when the machine was infected, and you'll also see when we published it. Those elements are not always there as far as time of infection, but that's just a matter of what the actual malware was able to bring over to the command and control server or the private channel.
And I'd like to clarify here. So what we've loaded in the watch list is a domain called Orbitive Labs, right? So you see in the bottom right-hand corner, this record for Orbitive Labs was found as an exposure on this machine. If anyone here in this webinar or viewing this recording decides that they'd like to have an individual call with SpyCloud and a demo, we would load your domain on the watch list, and we would be showing you the exposures specific to your organization. But Orbitive Labs is what we're going to use today for the demonstration.
Yeah, spot on. And so I can actually look at this from a machine level. I can also look at this from an application level and go, who all has lost credentials tied to my single sign-on as an example. And I can go back and see this view. So this is a tool often used by people doing incident response. And so think post-infection remediation of what else was lost here and what else do we need to remediate for not only the company, but hey, was there anything for Orbital Labs on your personal GitHub, on your Dropbox? Did you have any diagrams? Right? You can have those conversations now. All that is loaded by the watch list items, and watch list items can be domain names over here. They can be email addresses, or they can be your IP addresses or IP address ranges. All your domains that you log in will automatically be brought in. You don't need to add anything separate when it comes to email addresses. These are for separate email addresses that don't belong to your domain. So there's really two use cases I see here. Some VIPs allow security to watch their personal like mailboxes. If they put the Gmail for Andrew's Gmail as an example, it's not going to just plug in all his information. It's going to send Andrew an invite to allow the security team to watch his records for him. So that's one use case. The other is I have companies that have third-party contractors working for them. And as part of the contractual agreements, they get to see not only the email that is signed for this contractor, but the other work email as well. So that way they have visibility, and we'll come back to that in a second. Now, when it comes to data, there's actually two kinds of data here. We're going to be very fast here. We have third-party data, so these are not tied to malware. But as mentioned earlier, oftentimes you have phishing records. And phishing records for us is divided up into two types. So one is called an email list. And you'll notice this is email only. So from the pure incubation breach or other third-party breaches that actually have a lot of titles tied to the people that were lost as far as informational leaks, they've started building out attack plans, if you will. And so this is a conversation you can have if Ava was a VIP in your organization saying, hey, this is an example, not only you're at risk, but now you're actually being targeted. So we need to up our training as an example for phishing. I don't have any of it here in this demo space, but actually you get to see phishing toolkits as well. So in that case, it won't be an email, that'll be a higher severity because there'll be a password where somebody actually entered in their email address and whatever password they entered in, and you'd be able to see that here. The other kind of record we can bring in are infected records. Now, these are going to be stealers or specifically information stealing malware, like Redline Stealer, like Lunacy 2, Atomic Stealer that's targeting Macintosh specifically. And you get to see a whole host of data. So I get to see, again, depending on what the malware brought over, I can see the email address. I get to see the plain text password that was lost. I get to see the target URL. The infected machine, we're going to touch on this in a little bit and use this. When the malware detonates on a machine, so the criminals can keep up with which records belong on which machine, it assigns an alphanumeric character machine ID to that specific host. And if it maintains persistence or makes its way to the hard drive, you get to see as far as where it was hosted, but this is a browser-only attack, looks like. Didn't make it all the way down. And you get to see the user OS. So this is a Windows 10 64 bits, but with a registered system owner of rows. I can tell you this is not a enterprise endpoint. So I have a password that's lost, right? So that's interesting. And I want to remediate the passwords that are tied to this domain, but I don't want to just remediate that password. And so I'm going to pick on this one just for speed's sake. And I'm going to move over to something called investigations. And so I'm moving from enterprise protection to investigations to show you one specific tool. And we're going to come back to do an investigations here in a little bit. The investigations gives you access to the entire data lake. But some of our investigators, junior level, were getting lost by bringing records they didn't necessarily need for the investigation. And so I can use something called ID link.
Can
That
we
will do
pause
those.
for a moment, Phil? I'm sorry, because we got a question in chat and it's relevant to what you're doing right now. So the question says, can SpyCloud show me how many different online personas or leaked credentials are linked to a specific staff member and how that might impact business risk? So literally what Phil is doing right now in our investigations, he's plugging in one specific employee, and we're about to show you through ID Link how we correlate all the different exposures tied to that one person. So actually answering this question in real time.
100%. And that's a good question, by the way. So from that machine for this user, I get to see that there were 16 passwords lost or 16 emails lost in 29 different passwords. Now think about when you tell your users, hey, you have to change your password. What do they typically do? They're going to open up that suitcase of passwords, go back to their first job out of college because they remember that password, or their first, big title increase where they got a new, as far as email address at another company and a password when they got that raised, something that's in their bag that they've known for some time. And they will reuse one of those passwords or some kind of what we call fuzzy match of those passwords. So I'm not concerned with that one password. I'm concerned from that employee, 29 possible passwords. And so when it comes to remediation, we want it to be only forced when it's necessary, one. And two, we want to have as big of a threshold as possible to catch, hey, what else might this person use? And so there are different solutions for remediation, automation, and it depends on what your, as far as platform is for source of truth. So if you're authenticating for local Active Directory, the demo we're about to do is for Active Directory Guardian. If you're an Okta shop, we have an Okta Guardian. If you have Entra and you're fully, on the cloud, we actually have an Entra Guardian. So with a Guardian, you can do several things. One is when you're doing scanning for the first time, just run a manual scan. And from a manual scan, you'll get a report and you'll get to see, as far as a high level, of how many matches you have and what's at risk, right? But eventually, what I hope to see is for everyone to go from crawling to walking to running at some point, and we're going to do schedule scans. And this might be daily, and maybe I have a couple of daily scans, and I can pick what time I want it to run. In this case, I'm going to say local Active Directory, skip disabled accounts because who cares? I can bring in different organizational units and give them different policies if I want. And exactly what we talked about a while ago. Hey, I saw that one password that was lost. If I see that, maybe the first scan I do no remediation, but subsequent scans, maybe I force a password resets. Well, that's good for the exact match, but what about the ID link where we saw those other 28 passwords, not just the one? I can check against all of those passwords, and if I see, as far as exposure there, I can force automated remediation. But not just that, right? I mentioned that they make changes like the E becomes a 3. They add a $sign instead of an S. They add an exclamation point at the end. We can do fuzzy matching checking up to 1,000 iterations per password. So it's not one password in this example, it's not 29, it's actually 29,000 password variations we will check against to make sure they're not using those passwords or a fuzzy version of those passwords when they try to change their password. You can also do things like bring in a banned password list if you want to. We do support multiple forms of notification. I do not have an SMTP server tied to this, but we actually have email templates that you can modify and alert or send to maybe a SOC team as an example. Now I'm going to pause here and ask the panel, were there any other questions that came in about EAP?
No, no other questions that came in via chat, but I'd just like to summarize. So everything we've been looking at here, with the exception of popping into investigations for just a moment, was the enterprise protection. So that initial portal where you load in your domains, any external emails, any IP ranges, that is a way of having early detection and alerting via email, but you're still relying on manual remediation at that point. You get the alert, you pop into the portal, you look at the exposure, you check within your own environment, determine, is that exposed password, if that's the case, something similar to what's being used in your environment, etc. And then you can take action. If you want to automate that, the screen you're looking at right now is our native integration with Active Directory. Doesn't touch the domain controller, doesn't collect any plain text passwords from your environment. It's all hash for hash matching. But these scans are the set and forget version. So rather than having to pop into your portal and look every time you get an alert, although you're always welcome to, you always have access to that portal, you can rest easy knowing that these scans are going to be looking for exact matches and fuzzy matches on these exposures, and it can send the password resets for you, etc. So it is optional. If you don't use Active Directory, or if you just prefer to pull our data into your own SIEM or SOAR tools and kick off your own workflows and integrations, etc., we can do that. We have integrations built for about a dozen of the most common SIEM or SOAR tools, if not more than that. And we can also build custom integrations through our SpyCloud Connect team. So a few ways to automate the remediation, either through our API or through our Guardians here, Active Directory or full Entra Guardian. But everything you've seen so far is in relation to enterprise protection.
100%.
There was a question that came in while I was talking. How are the licenses structured and priced? So for enterprise protection, which again is what we've been viewing so far, it's done with two limiting factors. There's a domain limit and a head count, employee account number across all of those domains. For instance, our smallest license can monitor up to 20 domains and up to 1,000 employee accounts across all 20 of those domains. And then it scales up from there. So if you have 5,000 employees, if you have 10,000 employees, if you have 2,000 employees, but you have 50 domains, it just depends on those two factors. And that's how we price the enterprise protection license.
And there are two flavors of this. This is an offline scanner that runs on a domain member. So as Andrew says, it doesn't really have a strong impact as far as an Active Directory. We do have something that is more in line if that's something you desire. And by getting one, you're actually licensed for both. With that said, Andrew, are we good to go to investigations?
Yes, so kind of a soft break here. We're going to put enterprise protection in the rearview mirror here. Everything we've seen up to this point is for an organization looking inward at their own exposures. Now we're going to move on to investigations. And this is again where you're choosing the starting point and you're deciding based on what your objective is, what you're looking for. We have organizations that use this for anti-fraud, insider threat type of investigations, all the way to law enforcement and government agencies that may be looking for criminal attribution. I've seen human trafficking cases. I've seen child sex abuse cases. Basically, whatever it is that you're trying to look for within our data lake, you can tailor your own investigation to, and Phil's going to show you how that works.
Yeah, and I've listed, I don't know if you can see it, but we have some of the use cases here, like fraud detection, knowing your customer, supply chain monitoring is just a few. We're going to actually focus on fraudulent remote workforce and contract vetting on ours. And so I'm going to bring over an actual investigations portal that's more live than the one we had a while ago. And I'm going to pick on this organization just to start with, although I'm not going to show you all their data. So this is a My Workday Jobs tenant by this enterprise. And what I've done is I've run severity 25 or infected records only for this target domain. And you'll see here we brought in 157 total records. So when it comes to fraud, I'm looking for a lot of records for a specific target URL on a single machine. So that's one of the use cases we can start as far as a fraudulent, workflow of looking at a case. And we can do a number of things here. And so I'm going to actually move over to the graphical view. And so the graphical view is basically what we see while ago, giving you the data link analogy to where you see, hey, this is the actual Workday tenants. I get to see the email addresses that were lost along with the infected machine IDs, email addresses, passwords, things of that nature. When I'm looking for, hey, let's figure out if there are any people being bad, I can change my asset type to infected, and now I'm just looking at it based on an infected machine ID. Well, remember what I said, I have this one target URL, so I'm looking for multiple, in this case, breaches tied to that one specific target URL. And here the top one is there are 5 unique credentials on this one machine just for this Workday tenant. And so I'm going to put that in my clipboard. I'm going to go over here and investigate, and these are all the selectors that I have. So obviously a while ago, I went to the target domain. I can actually do an email domain. So when I'm doing reconnaissance, getting ready to prepare for demos, I'll oftentimes first vet out the target with the investigations license. I can do it by IP address, national ID, plain text password, social handle. If it's an uncommon username or phone number, that's usually very viable as well. So back to investigation, we'll go to infected machine ID. I'm going to put the infected machine ID from the malware here and click investigate. It's then going to go to the back end and to the private Amazon hosted data center, and it's going to bring over all the records, over 2,970 records for this one machine. Now, I'm telling you right now, we're looking at someone who's fraudulent just because I've seen this before. I can kind of recognize it. But I started my query looking at my Workday jobs. And now I get to see that there's a lot of things above and beyond what the tenant we started with, right? I recognize most of these names actually. But to verify that we are seeing and understanding what is in front of us, I'm going to apply some filters and look at a target URL. And so I'm going to put Workday, and then I'm going to sort by target URL. And so the other way of finding fraudulent behavior is looking for, again, same and different together. So this is the same machine, same IP address. This is a Windows 11 Pro. I see 1, 2, 3, 4 applications for Zoom on my Workday jobs. I see passwords that are identical or very close or very repetitive across the entire, in this case, machine that we brought in. But all the emails are desperate. They're all different. So this is the same person or same criminal group applying multiple times as different people for jobs at these organizations, like Zoom, like Zendesk, right? Woodward, Western Government University.
So again, the common thread here is these were all on the same machine, right? Not to mention the passwords are being reused, but all of these different email accounts and logins were created on that one malware infected machine.
Yeah, 100%. And so this is pretty much an open and shut, in my opinion. And so if I'm bringing in people that are applying for work and I see this kind of behavior, I'm not even going to look anymore. I'm just going to basically dismiss this because there's probably a better candidate that we can find further down the line. right? And I haven't pulled the actual raw log yet for this machine because I just found this today. But one of the things that I've found by doing this remote work as far as fraudulent workforce is I used to see a lot of this coming out of China. And a lot of this came from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea remote IT workforce. Well, they've had the same problem that everyone else is having. They're running out of talent. And so they're offshoring a lot of the work to places like Pakistan, like India, like the Philippines. And so if we ran this IP address, you would see that actually this is this actor is actually coming out of India. So this is one of the use cases you can use for, in this case, remote work vetting to avoid hiring basically a potential criminal enterprise from getting access to your intellectual property. Any questions so far? I'll take that as a no.
Yeah, nothing in chat.
So that's one use case for investigations. The other one that I see the most commonly used for is supply chain exposure monitoring. I'm quoting one of our customers who said that they actually had a supply chain tool that basically gave them a green or red or yellow as an example. So, good or dangerous or what have you. But there were several instances where the third-party tool told them that the third-party company was good, they were green, and something would happen. And their executive leadership would come back and going, hey, what's up here? You said that this company was good. They were relying on a third-party tool, but they didn't understand what was behind the data. They didn't know as far as what was behind the curtains. So this is a fantastic tool because it opens up all the data lake for you. So you have access to every record and you can measure the exact kind of risk from that third-party vendor that's connecting to you. So with that said, this is one of the use cases for investigations, but there's another place where we can plug in. There's actually two more places. The other is for consumer protection.
All right, so another soft break there. We're entering the third leg of our products here, but on that investigations, I'll answer a question that was asked about enterprise. How do we price it? So unlike the enterprise protection, where that is based on basically the size of the organization, the number of domains, number of employees, etc. With investigations, it's just priced per seat. So you get one set of credentials for one seat of that investigation license. You have an unlimited number of queries. It is tied to that user via MFA, so it's not easily shared amongst multiple users. If you're there with the person and you can MFA and then someone sitting next to you can use it, that type of thing, certainly. But it's one seat per one user, generally speaking, in one cost there. So if there is an interest in a further demo and exploration of investigations and even POC access, I'll be happy to further discuss that as well.
Yeah, thank you. So moving to one of the ways you can use this in the consumer play. So consumer, think about people logging in to a web application to where they're accessing either information or ordering goods that have usually a high dollar value. So think banking, think, large scale people buying cars online or things of that nature. And so one of the things you can do with SpyCloud, because we're very API driven, is you can plug us into your web applications to do those scans, to do a couple of things. And so I'm going to do a high risk workflow here. And in this case, someone's logging into the web application on a phone. To the right over here, you're seeing the core requests being sent to our API saying, hey, I have this user. Tell me what you know about this user. And so we can respond saying, hey, in fact, we detected malware for this user about a week ago, and it was Rise Pro Stealer, right? We'll give you the infection date. We'll show you not only that, but you understand as far as what was lost for that, as well as any third-party breaches, such as this one right here. And a third-party breach is similar that I didn't show you a while ago. This is something to where they sign on to another application and they actually had a password lost in that third-party breach. Now, we saw someone that was exposed. Now it's about, hey, what do we do about that user, right? Do I deactivate their session cookies and force them to re-authenticate? Do I deny a login? What I see most common, because it happens so often, people don't question, is we're just going to prompt this user to change their password. And so this is where we're going to move on to the other thing that you can do, because again, I want to make sure that they change their password to something that is a good password versus reusing perhaps a bad password as they did before. And so the second API is they get the code and verify their account and create the new password. We actually want to get some information about that password, and we're going to pass that off on another programmatic call, but we're using something called k-nymity. And k-nymity means I'm getting the hash that you're using. I'm getting the first 5 characters of that hash following the standard. And we're sending from SpyCloud, we don't know what that password is, but we're sending you every result that we have that has the same first 5 characters. And then you can determine, as far as if that is an exact match. If it is, you can say, hey, that doesn't meet our requirements. Please choose another password. And then once they're good to go, then they're able to log in. And at a higher level, walking through it, what you saw once they changed their password is we simply set the first 5 characters of that hash back to SpyCloud, which resulted in us sending what hashes that we have with the same first 5 characters back to your API and then the application. And then it'll determine, hey, is there a password match? If there is, and I'm going to make them choose another password. If there's not, we're going to let that password go through. So those are the 2 APIs. One is we're looking at malware that probably detonated at some point in time on that machine. And so we need to take remediation action, perhaps. So we need to block that external file, money transfer outside the bank. We need to stop that person from buying that large scale ticketed item, right? Until we verify that's who that user is. So that way we can use this to prevent fraudulent losses. And this is one of the easier sells for SpyCloud, because oftentimes customers that are dealing with fraudulent losses actually have a numeric value. And if you're losing millions of dollars a year, or a lot of money every year, a small solution is often very easy to justify. Questions on that?
Nothing new
So
in chat. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to talk about one thing, although because this is recorded, I can't show you live data and I don't have any dummy data to show. I'm going to talk through what happens when a stealer, like Redline, detonates on a machine. And so usually it's done via drive-by download, and they will target specific host. Oftentimes, Redline will target Windows, and it grabs a lot of information, including what's in the browser cache. Because one of the kickbacks I often get on these conversations is, hey, I don't know if you'll see my phone or not when I hold it up, we have 2-factor authentication, so we're good to go. Well, it's a matter about what happens when you do that 2-factor authentication. And oftentimes when I do that, it generates what's called an active session cookie that is assigned to my browser on my machine that I'm doing the query from. The other record the criminals are interested in is, oftentimes you may remember that when you're signing up to applications like that, it'll have a little box down below that says, remember this browser, remember this host, remember this phone, as an example. If you click that or allow that, it issues something called a device token session cookie. And although the device token session cookie still requires you to have the email address or username and password, the credentials, that device token session cookie will bypass multi-factor authentication. And so they're looking for the active session cookie, and most organizations today are very mature, and they basically have a short time to live for those. But the longer time to live oftentimes is on that device token session cookie. And so depending on what those time to lives are set at, that's the way that the criminals can get that data. And we also can collect that data, bring that to you in a form to where you can deactivate those cookies before the criminals can leverage that to basically commit fraud in your organization at the consumer level, or come in on the enterprise side and compromise a workforce employee. So we're about 12 minutes to the top of the hour. I was going to pause at this point in time and ask if there are any people that have pertinent questions you want to ask verbally or put in the chat.
Yeah, I'll give a pause for questions here for the next 30 seconds or so as well, and then I'll do a brief summary before passing it back to Simon. But yeah, feel free anyone to chime in either verbally or by chat. We'll give just a moment. While we're waiting there, I'll go ahead and answer again the same question, but in reference to the last product we looked at, the consumer protection. It's priced on the size of the clientele base. The first cutoff is 500,000 customers. So if there's a bank infrastructure, or I mentioned some of our most common use cases, hotels, airlines, things of that nature, if the threshold, the number of customer accounts they have, and generally we look at active customer accounts, so those that maybe log in at least once every 3 to 6 months, not not accounts that have been laying dormant for years necessarily. But then after 500,000, we have a few other cutoff tiers. And since we do service some of the world's largest organizations like cell phone companies, things like that, we do have consumer protection clients that have millions, tens of millions of customers. How frequently is the SpyCloud database updated? Was a question that just came through. It's it's being updated all the time. It's being updated right now, for instance. So anytime we're gathering information, it goes through that curation process, which often takes, it's gone down from once a week to about once every 15 minutes that we're curating new data. So we're essentially streaming the exposed data. I mean, there's a small amount of latency there, but 15 minutes or so. And we, in the event that we get a very large ingest on a particular day, our guarantee is that malware data will be published within 1 day, and third-party breach data will be published within 2 days, but often it's within minutes of ingesting it. All right, I think that's all we had come through question-wise. So quick summary, and I'll turn it over to Simon to close this out here in a moment. But again, basically, SpyCloud is a data company at its core, right? How we channel the flow of that data dictates the products and the licenses. So if you're interested in looking at your own organization's exposures, which we covered in the first third, we take our data lake and we basically build out a river for you where only in that direction flows the information pertinent to your watch list, your domains, your external emails where you send those invitations that can be the personal Gmails of yourself or your employees, or your VIP employees, high value targets, etc. It can be your third-party vendors. If you have a domain that you would kind of like to monitor that you don't own, but it has 20 employees on it that are contractors for you, you can put all 20 of those individuals in those external email slots for you. If we channel the flow of that information to your consumer base, that's what we looked at towards the end. If it's of interest to you, or if it's pertinent to any losses at your company, either data or money, if a bad actor were able to log into a consumer account and do anything fraudulent or nefarious, you may want to be alerted whenever that login occurs and it matches an exposure in our data lake. And then if we don't channel the flow of the data at all, we just give you access to our entire data lake. That's our investigations. You're kind of combing through it yourself, depending on what your objectives are. We did get one more question. Mentioned integrations with using the API. How long do those take to deploy? Some of them are fairly instantaneous. If your third-party tool uses a RESTful API, and especially if we've built our out-of-the-box integration for it, which we've done so for Splunk, for Palo Alto, was it called now? Cortex, I believe. Devo, Tines, Elastic, and I'm sure I'm missing several others. They're all on our website, by the way, at spycloud.com. You can click on integrations. But all the usual suspects there, pretty instantaneous. Of course, you'll have a dedicated technical account manager to help you along the way if you have any trouble. And then if there's a custom integration that's needed, those can take a little bit longer depending on what it is. I know we just built one for Sentinel-1 for a client, and that's about to be more native. We're about to have that available for general audience. But that first user, I think it took us a little over a month to build that. So it just depends on the complexity. But for those that are already there, for those common integrations, yeah, it's pretty much plug and play. All right. With the last few minutes here, Simon, if you want to bring us home.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Andrew and Phil, for the great session, great demo, and hopefully this has given everyone, a much clearer view of how critical identity protection is when we think about security. And really, as we've already talked about, if you want to explore further, really the value is in using your data and seeing what can be done during a demo. And obviously, if you want to expand further, as we said, there's that no obligation proof of concept that can be run as well. Please feel free to reach out to us after the webinar, and we can get you connected with the appropriate team. On behalf of Secure Agility and SpyCloud, thank you very much for your time today, and we certainly look forward to continuing the conversation in the coming weeks and months. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and I second that invitation. Phil and I take great pleasure in bringing you guys in, showing your exposure data, even if just that session, and again, there's no obligation to purchase or continue to POC, but it's worthwhile just to see what data is out there tied to your organization. And then, of course, the real value is being alerted about future exposures, but happy to share that historical data with any of you on a demo call.
Right,
And
perfect.
yes, thanks again, everybody, for your time. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Have a good
Thank you,
rest of your
everyone.
week, everyone. Thank you.